The Frogs by Aristophanes is one of those stories that, at first, you're a bit skeptical about. Is it interesting to read? Will I get the references? Is there a movie I can watch beforehand so that I know what it is about? And the answer to those questions are yes, maybe, and better yet, there's a musical about it. So a quick rundown of everything I will cover in this video so that you can skip to the parts that interest you the most. I will start with a little bit of background on the writing of the Frogs. A summary of the story, its comeback in 1941, its Broadway production in 2004, a short analysis, and a conclusion. Without further ado, let's begin. The year is 405 BC. The final stages of the Peloponnesian War marked the end of Athens as a democracy. Having their fleet slaughtered, famine and starvation spreading across the cities, and a great number of politicians exiled, the Athenian citizen was greatly demoralized. Athens would inevitably lose the war to Sparta. Athens had also recently suffered the great loss of its most prominent poets and playwrights of the time, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus. It is worth mentioning that Greek theatre played a pivotal role in shaping the ideologies of the citizens, as it was the biggest form of communication and civic engagement at the time. Aristophanes wrote The Frogs as a critical essay on the role of art in education. He addresses political, religious, and theatrical themes in the form of comedy, while also commenting about the importance of traditional values. And in a more subtle tone, it also touches upon themes of personal identity. Remember how poet Dionysus makes his first appearance fully disguised as Heracles instead of his usual regalia? This is a facade Dionysus that a poignant drama takes in order to achieve his goal. In the beginning of the story, he believes that his normal self, the unruly, one-brewing, dolphin-dotting, hedonistic theater kid, doesn't stand a chance to embark on a journey to Hades on his own, let alone have the courage to face the dangers the underworld has to offer. He willingly trades his sensibilities for a more imposing character, that of his half-brother, Heracles, god of strength and heroes. And this is important because this scenario poses the question of, can the arts really make a difference? Dionysus' wishes are simple: to revive a great poet who can speak to the troubles of our society, to give us comfort, wit and wisdom, and also challenge our complacencies. In that case, there was no need for the disguise. Dionysus had already been to Hades on one occasion to revive his mother Semele. Why would he go to Heracles for advice? His beliefs already told him that a great poet can indeed make a difference, that it could save the country from apathy and intellectual contempt, unless his own insecurities were holding him back from pursuing his goal. Perhaps he considered that a change had to be made in order to be taken seriously. Kind of like the many changes in leadership Athens took in order to better their chances to win the war against Sparta. If that's the case, then it mirrors the country's situation perfectly. Dionysus is trying to win a war by forgetting the very same traits that made him the kind of god he is, while Athens is trying to win it by avoiding to learn from their mistakes, and by exiling their politicians until one of them gives them victory. But I went on a little bit of a tangent there, so back to the story. Dionysus, accompanied by his slave Xanthias, showed up at Heracles' home, asking for the quickest way to Hades. Not noticing the absurdity of that question, Heracles tells him to either hang himself, drink poison, or to jump from the tallest cliff at hand. Eventually, Heracles points Dionysus to the right direction, embarking him on his journey. With directions in hand, a very convincing disguise, and his servant Xanthias, Dionysus sets to cross the river Styx, which in this case is plagued by frogs. Not your regular run-of-the-mill, slimy, rotten friend, but a very contemptuous creature who has not a care in the world and is willing to drag anyone down with them in the puddle of apathy. Dionysus gets almost taken by these creatures, but somehow manages to escape. Even though he had a hard time battling with these frogs, it's only when he arrives at Hades that his facade is challenged by the many denizens Heracles has wronged during his last trip to Hades. To prevent himself from the undesired retribution, he cowardly switches his disguise with Xanthias, who is ironically welcomed by these denizens once he's wearing the Heracles costume. Upon seeing this change of fate, Dionysus switches back, hoping to enjoy the warm welcome. It doesn't happen. This switching back and forth continues for a while until Xanthias has had enough. While wearing the Heracles costume, he proposes a painful way to unveil the true nature of his master by submitting Dionysus to be flogged for his transgressions. After all, if he's a god, he won't feel a thing. Of course, Dionysus didn't like that plan and suggests that Xanthias should be flogged as well, because if he's also god, then she shouldn't feel a thing either. You would think that one of them would bend at the painful flogs, but somehow they were able to withstand it. So much so that the guy torturing them has trouble coming to a conclusion. So he decides that Hades and Persephone should be able to tell who's the god and who's the fake. It is worth noting that Dionysus was only able to achieve this once he stopped pretending to be someone he's not, even if he was briefly punished for it. The second half of the play brings us to Dionysus settling an ongoing dispute between the playwrights, Euripides and Aeschylus, to see who's the best tragedian, and to decide himself who's the best option to bring back from the dead. The challenge was simple. Whoever can provide the best advice to save Athens shall be revived. This is where we, as the audience, get to compare the two predominant ideologies of this play. Traditional values, held and promoted by Aeschylus, versus modern values, preached by Euripides. While the latter provided an idealistic view on Athens on what it could come to be, the former provided more practical advice for the ongoing situation. After a much heated battle, Dionysus makes the tough choice of reviving Aeschylus instead of his intended Euripides. That's how the play ends. Aristophanes' argument for this decision is that Athenians have lost the ability to judge worthy men, and only by bringing back the old traditions that helped to shape the moral of Athens should we come victorious from the war. But what were these old and new traditions, you ask? Well, they can be summarized from the advice provided by the two poets. Euripides. If we removed our trust from politicians on whom we now rely and used the ones we don't use now, we could be saved. It's clear we're not doing well with what we're doing now. If we reverse our course, we might be saved. He basically proposes a strategy to continue fighting, to deploy a new generation of men with a new set of values to continue the war, hoping it will bring Athens to victory. Meanwhile, Aeschylus advises: when they, Athens, consider their foes' land their own, and think of their land as the enemy's, and when they look upon the ships as riches, and see their wealth as richness. In the first half of the paragraph, Aeschylus is calling for a truce between Athens and Sparta, while in the second he's alluding to the old Athenian policy of putting all their faith in the navy to prosecute the war, leaving the land open for enemies' occupation. By focusing on the war, they will lose their common folk. We have the old traditions that value the prosperity of Athens over the war victory count, and the new traditions that put emphasis on displaying military power over their neighbors. This comparison is so blatant that it forces us to rethink our current situation and the challenges our society is facing on a bigger scale. Like, how did we get so bad in the first place? Which political party was the country supporting at the time? What did we as citizens do to make our democracy work as it should? And to make it clear, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. And I'm definitely not telling you what you think or which political party you should support. This is just my interpretation of a Greek play written more than 2,000 years ago. Now, going back to the video. The play was so positively received in Athens that it won first place at the Linnaean Festival, and even got a rerun at the Dionysian during March of the same year. Unfortunately, this will be the very same year of the Athenian defeat by the Spartan navy. The Frogs will remain a remarkably unnoticed Greek performance for the next 2,000 years. 1941, New Haven, USA. Say you're a university student getting to perform a Greek play at uni, but you don't know where or what would be a good choice, so you head over to the director of the drama department to ask him for advice, and he responds, "Why, the Yale swimming pool in the Payne Whitney Gymnasium for a production of Aristophanes' The Frogs. Isn't it obvious?" This is how we got Bert Shevelov to fully adapt Aristophanes' work by substituting Euripides and Aeschylus with Bernard Shaw and William Shakespeare. The play consisted of Dionysus rowing across the pool, while the swimming team, dressed as frogs, swam around the boat. And that was it. That was the play. The story would go unnoticed for at least another 33 years when Shevelov suggested to the new director of the Yale School of Drama, Robert Boston, to repeat the feat at the same place. This time with his old friend Stephen Sondheim, with whom he had already collaborated in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, but immediately had to convince Stephen to compose music for this obscure play. He eventually conceded with 5 songs for the repertoire. This show took place in May 21st, 1974. It was an hour and 10 minutes long and ran for a total of 8 performances, providing a net profit of $7,000, which was a huge disappointment given the amount of effort put into making the acoustics of a swimming pool work for a musical of this scale. Hint, it didn't. The first-rate talent displayed at the show was overshadowed by the sound quality of the venue. I mean, just listen to this.
When we are waxing humorous, please don't wait. The jokes are obscure but humorous. We'll explain.
Sondheim himself compared the acoustics of the performance to putting a show in a men's urinal. Even though the performance received a good reception, this disastrous setback prevented Shevelov and Sondheim's Frogs from being produced again in Yale. The show isn't even listed in the library of performances under Boston's direction. It was that much of a flop. In 1979, Nathan Lane found a copy of the script at the drama bookshop. He was very intrigued by it. He started in concert presentation of the original version of the show as part of Stephen Sondheim's 70th birthday celebration at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Lane ad-libbed a line, and Sondheim said, "That sounds like Bird. He would have liked that." Washington, D.C. 2000. Even though the musical was a sound failure, pun intended, Sondheim and friends had kept the material alive by offering concert readings. One of these at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., this time with Nathan Lane as Dionysus, who had already developed an interest in the script when he chanced upon it some 20 years earlier. This prompted Lane to contact Susan Shulman, director and choreographer, to convince Sondheim to expand the musical into a fully fledged 2-act show. Lane's motivation for a revival musical relied on the political situation at the time. After September 11, I started to think, there's something in this piece for now. There's something idealistic about the notion of someone believing that the arts can make a difference. I found it moving in light of what is going on in the world. What moved me was the notion that Dionysus, not unlike Don Quixote, was going off to Hades on a quest in the hope that if he brings back this great writer, and the writer wrote plays again, he could effect some kind of change, that people will listen. It was the idea that in a very troubling time, people will turn to the arts for perspective, that we need a poet. It's the very romantic and idealistic notion that art matters, that it can affect people. New York, 2004. The now 2 hours long musical was performed at the Vivian Beaumont Theatre in Lincoln Center, New York City. It ran for 92 performances from July 22nd to October 10th and grossed a total amount of $7 million over the course of 4 months. It received mixed reviews, most of them were negative. Some critics complained about the loose structure of the show and the mix of themes and styles, while members of the audience found it controversial due to its political themes. Remember, this was after 9/11, and this is a very anti-war performance. It was a very difficult, very divisive musical according to Lane. Just take a look at the political references displayed in the dialogues. The big Polly Bush frog that makes preemptive strikes and then forgets why it attacked in the first place. Most of the political references are indirect yet clear to the Iraq occupation. The Peloponnesian War still rages on, Xanthias. A war we may not be able to win. A war we shouldn't even be in. Words seem to fail them, even the simplest words. Our leaders have filled us with fear, and that's the way they like us, frightened and vulnerable, so they can do as they please. Lane's attempt to combine political issues with comedy goes against the American tendency to consider serious drama as the only appropriate vehicle for political content. Also, Shaw makes some bold statements during his introduction. Patriotism is the conviction that this country is superior to all other countries because you were born in it. Democracy substitutes election by the incompetent many for appointment by the corrupt few. When a man knows nothing and thinks he knows everything, that points clearly towards a political career. And I get it, the musical tried to condense too many things in a single performance. The first half was a light-hearted tale of a hero's journey, while the more serious second half was a contest between erudites, where the jokes become indeed obscure and numerous. Broadway musicals rarely address political issues up front, and when you straight up call your leaders ineffectual and corrupt in front of an audience largely composed by Republicans, well, it is bound to attract some backlash. My interpretation of this play is that Aristophanes intended to introduce his audience to literary criticism and to re-evaluate the morals of our current society. The Athenian citizen of 405 BC was very much concerned about the quality of their leaders, but in general made poor and desperate political choices. The traditional set of values he talks about come from a conservative point of view, which in ancient Athens had to do with peacemaking rather than prolonging the war. He pointed out that what really is important in a nation is the quality of the citizens, not their eagerness to fight. Meanwhile, The Frogs, a new musical, has an interesting take on that message, perhaps one that misses its intended audience. In his work, George Bernard Shaw depicted war in a more negative view than William Shakespeare did. Shaw was a pacifist, yet Shakespeare was the winner of the contest. In this case, and based on the seniority of the authors, it is the new traditions that call for a peaceful approach to our society's troubles instead of the old ones. Truthfully, Shaw's arguments missed the point during the contest, but the choice of reviving Shakespeare doesn't quite sit with the original message either. It rather feels like a politically safe choice for the audience at that time, given that he is widely recognized as the greatest English writer. In any case, what I really appreciate about this adaptation is that even though it is not perfect, it actively calls the audience to criticize the show, to actually stop and to think about each of the characters' motives throughout the musical. Cynthias didn't want to challenge the status quo in the first act, yet in the second he has a change of heart and decides to stay in Hades. The frogs live in a place of apathy and conformity, far away from society, and have no intention to change their ways. The dead and the Dionysians live in a permanent state of hedonism, and our hero Dionysus gets his bum beaten while pursuing his goal. Putting the trajectory of the frogs in a chronological way makes me think of how difficult of a performance it is for any time in history, due to its controversial opinions. I can't speak for all the performances of the frogs ever made, but the fact that, even to this day, it remains as a fairly unpopular play says something about the kind of reception it gets from the public. We know very little about its debut in 405 BC, only that it won first place and had a rerun 2 months after. Then we have the 1941 and the 1974 adaptations, other registered commercial productions in 1984, 1990, 2000, and then we have the 2004 musical adaptation that had its challenges by trying to tell a serious message through a silly and flamboyant musical filled to the brim with a slapstick comedy. A very traditional Greek play if you think about it. Which take us back to our question, can the arts really make a difference? The god Dionysus believed it would, so he risked his bomb to bring back a poet from the dead. Nathan Lane believed it, so he risked putting on a politically loaded show during the aftermath of 9/11. Aristophanes believed it, so he wrote an optimistic story about literary criticism in the midst of a war his country had already lost. I believe the arts can make a difference. That we have the choice to let ourselves get influenced by the materials we consume. All in all, I believe it is worth checking out both the play and the musical. It feels like a waste to let a work with such a compelling message to be obscured by our apathy towards current events. Also, the music slaps. Sondheim himself wrote this. Just go and check it out. Thank you so much for listening to my video, and I hope to see you soon again. Bye bye!
I love to travel.